If you watch my video reviews, you may know that from time to time I like to take a detour from published games and to explore print-and-play games, just because I find that some of these games can be incredibly creative, and just because they don't make it to be published, because they don't fit this or that niche of the market, that doesn't mean they're bad. And sometimes there are really some fun designs to unbury. It just takes some patience to go and look for these designs. Usually I play print-and-play designs that are extremely easy to print and to build, because I do not have much extra time and I do not have great manual skills. I almost have no manual skills whatsoever. So I just look for designs that are incredibly easy to assemble. The one that I'm telling you about today, Thermopylae Solo, is one such design. In fact, I did not even print it. It was so simple that I simply drew my board, which is an 8x8 grid, and you can also use just a regular chessboard, and I drew and cut and built my counters out of a cereal box. I was on vacation on Siesta Key, Florida last week with my family. I was having great quality time with my family during the day, playing games at night. I wanted to try this game. I didn't have a printer around. I just made my copy in 10 minutes. Great. Or you can use other components, of course. In this case, for example, I'm showing you a fantasy re-theme of the game with a regular chessboard and fantasy miniatures. You can just make your copy as luxurious or as Spartan as you want it to be. Pun intended. Okay, Thermopylae Solo. I think you have heard of the event, one of the most famous events in military history, but definitely one that is hard to recreate in a game that makes sense to play, that is not boring to play. Well, let's see how the designer handled the situation here. You play on an 8x8 grid. You, the player, have 3 units, each representing 100 Spartans. And then you have the Persians that will enter the board in waves. Each wave is pretty much a macro turn. And first you'll have the fight between your Spartans and 3 incoming Persians that are trying to exit the board and or to destroy you in the process. If you eliminate them all, then you start a second wave in which you will have four Persians. There's an order in which you place them on the board. Then if you win that wave, you will have 5, then 6, then 7, then 8. Do not expect to see that happening. I certainly have not. I haven't gone that far. You lose the game when all of your units are eliminated or when a Persian unit exits the board. You win the game, well, I don't know exactly how. I don't think that the rules explain that clearly. There are 2 ways that make sense to me. One is if you survive until the last wave, the wave in which 8 Persian units enter the board, and I think that's going to be unlikely. Or maybe you just go on, you keep going on until you lose the game, and at that point you simply calculate the level of victory or your performance based on the number of waves that you survived. Maybe there isn't a victory condition, just different levels of defeat, which, by the way, would make perfect sense given the situation. You are the Spartans that are defending at the Thermopylae. What do you expect? A key concept in this game is that when the figures on the board act, you will roll dice for them. The number of dice is determined by the stats of the unit, the stats regarding the type of action that the unit is trying to perform. You roll dice and you're looking for doubles. Let's see what we have here. Well, we have a single double of 4. Suppose that actually we also had 2 3s. Now, the number of doubles that you roll corresponds to the number of actions that you receive, that your activated unit receives. And then you look at the number that was rolled, the number that forms the double, to determine the level of the action. For example, here you have an action of level 3 and an action of level 4. I explained this, and now I can explain how you apply that. Your units have 3 or 4 stats. 3 basic ones: close combat, defense and movement. They may also have range combat. At the beginning of the game, you customize your units. I think this is really great. You have 15 points to distribute among your stats. You need to give at least 2 points to close combat, to defense, and to movement. Range combat may have 0 or may have some, but you still have 15 points. So you may have some units that have a lot of movement, less defense, a lot of attack. They have range combat, but they're extremely weak in close combat. You can just create your faction of 3 Spartan units, each representing 100 warriors. The Persians all have the same stats, they're all the same. In each wave you go first, you activate your 3 units, one after the other. When you're activating a unit, first you roll a number of dice equal to the movement point of that unit. Suppose that I have 6 movement points for that guy and that my roll was such. I show this because I want to show that when you have more than a double, they have triples or quadruples, you can read the dice in different ways. You can read a triple as a double or 1 level of action more than the number of the double. Complicated way to say you can read this as a single action level 5, or you can read this as multiple actions. You can read this triplet as 2 actions level 4. So you roll your dice and you will have, if you roll doubles or triples at all, a certain amount of actions and a certain level. You look at the level of your highest action. If your highest level is 1, you can use your actions to move only, not to attack. That is, suppose that I had rolled 3 ones and nothing else, and I decide to read that as 2 actions level 1, then I have 2 actions that I can spend to move. I can move my activated unit by 2 spaces, and units can move orthogonally or diagonally. I can move the unit by 2 spaces, but even if I am close to an opponent, my highest number was a 1, I cannot use my actions to attack that turn. If my highest result is between 2 and 5 included, then I can use my actions to move and I can use one of my actions to attack. Suppose that this is the situation. I decide to read this as 2 level 4, that's 2 actions. I have another action here. I can use my actions to move and attack, then 1 action to move 1 space, 1 action to move another space, 1 action to attack. If my highest action is a 6, voila, this is the case, then I can use all of my actions to move and I get a free attack at the end of my movement. To attack, it is extremely simple. You roll a number of dice equal to your close combat. If you are performing close combat, units that are performing range attacks, as long as they are not adjacent to an opponent and they have a straight line to an opponent, they can attack that opponent using their range value. When you're attacking, doesn't matter which value you're using, you roll a number of dice equal to your stat. Suppose that those 2 guys are fighting. The guy has 5 dice in combat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Terrible roll in this game. Suppose that the guy had actually rolled 2 5s. The defender then rolls dice, rolls a number of dice equal to his defense factor. All Persian units have 5 dice in defense. Let's see how that works. Well, the defender only has 1 defense action, level 1. I have an attack of level 5. I win the attack. If your highest attack action is higher than that of the defender, you score a hit. It only takes a hit to eliminate a Persian unit. It takes 2 hits to eliminate a Spartan unit, so you need a marker to indicate your units that have a wound. If there is a tie, that is, this guy has rolled the same highest action, then as a tiebreaker you do not use the level of the highest action, but you use the number of actions. So suppose that there's a tie for the level, but I have 2 actions, then I still score a hit. If I do not have a higher number of actions during the tiebreak, then I simply missed. When the Spartans are done activating, moving and attacking, the Persians move and attack. They move in a very dumb way. They just advance by 2 spaces, and if they get within 2 squares of one of your units, they move adjacent to it and they attack. And in that case, they simply roll their attack dice, you roll your defense dice, and you resolve the situation. The Persians do not have any range attacks. And, well, there are other modifications in case you have multiple units fighting against a different amount of units, inside 2 against 1 instead of 2 against 2, which is resolved as 1 against 1. But the game is pretty much what I told you. You have roll dice, waves of actions in which a lot of stuff will happen, and sooner or later your people will die. That's what the game tells you, that's the story that the game tells you, that's the story that the game should tell you, given the theme. What do I think about this game? A lot of great things. This is exactly the type of design that I hope to encounter when I'm exploring Board Game Geek lists for print and play games. It's exactly the type of game that I hope to find. Why? Because it is fun to play, extremely easy to build, extremely linear to learn. It probably sounds more complicated as I explain it than when you play it. It is extremely intuitive. It has many more options than one would expect from such a simple design. You can customize your units. You can have different combinations of Spartans each game. And you can have the stats on the counters if you decide to print and make counters, or simply can remember or write down the stats if you're using miniatures. But what is surprising is that the action is pretty interesting, actually. It creates a growing sense of tension, of despair, as you see that your warriors are, yes, valiant, they're taking down large amounts of enemies, but there's just no turning back the tide, and sooner or later you'll die. But again, it makes sense. And I was surprised that such a linear situation, such a scripted situation, such a doom situation still could create narratives that I actually cared about. I really wanted to see what happened. This is not the most sophisticated and the deepest game you have played this year, but for what it is, for something so simple, something that doesn't cost a thing, something that you can build anywhere out of almost anything, well, I would say that this is a game that can give you a disproportionate amount of fun. Again, disproportionate from the material components, the simplicity of the rules, how light the game is. Definitely, I had a really good time playing this game. I was absolutely impressed. Now that I know the rules, I can simply put together a copy wherever I am. Again, outdoors almost nothing. Great flexibility there. But what matters the most is that this is a good solitaire game. Not the greatest, but far from the worst. Definitely a game that I enjoyed.